Here's food for thought when digesting the benefits of going green. A plan in the House Climate Bill gives farmers incentives to plant trees on their farmland instead of planting crops. And that has some predicting a major spike in food prices. Tracy, I mean, this sounds nuts. They could plant some trees in Central Park. We need them after the storm. But on farmland?
Look, it's another case of the government micromanaging the environment again, like thinking they can control how much carbon dioxide we breathe. It absolutely will affect food prices at the end of the day. And, of course, they don't see the forest behind the so-called trees because all they're thinking about is right now. But if these farmers use their farmland for forests instead, and they're looking for about 18 million acres worth of forests, that will dramatically increase the price of our food because, well, there will be less of it out there.
Wayne?
No way. Let me tell you, the biggest determinant in food pricing and from a farmer's point of view is weather. Weather and the availability of land. There's tons of land out there to plant. Farmers are smart guys. They do not go out and plant trees where they're going to have cropland. Those trees will be in other places, and it's not going to affect the price of food one iota. Distribution, weather, and those things, competition, affect food prices much more.
But didn't we see this happen with corn, Wayne? Didn't we see them like jump on the corn ethanol bandwagon and everybody went and replaced their crops with corn, and next thing you knew we had shortages other places?
And wasn't that the private market jacking up the price of
that isn't true.
That
does not stand up to statistical analysis. That's not true.
Yeah, I mean, Jonas, Wayne's saying it's as old as a farmer's almanac. It depends on the weather.
That's the big part. Look, I think in the short run there could be some issues, but the idea is what is the long-term flow of farmland. Let's not forget there's been times in history where farmers over-farmed land and we had problems and shortages as well. The global warming issue, in theory, could lead to major food shortages later because it affects weather, to Wayne's point. So, yes, this might rise prices up in the short run. We're worried about the 50 to 100-year flow of weather and food. I know you don't believe the world's getting warmer, but you should be in New York to actually hot.
Well, this has nothing to do with global warming. This has nothing to do with farmers. Terry, this has everything to do with the environmental movement. And they are against, once again, any use of the earth. Any time man wants to use the earth, whether it's corn, whether it's oil, they're against that. So they pass carbon tax limits and cap and trade, or in this case, simply limit supply. And Trace is absolutely right. The last time the government got involved in micromanaging agriculture, there was riots for rice. And the more they get involved, the more expensive it's going to ultimately cost mankind.
Yeah, Steve,
Jonathan, you got it. You're making a big philosophical argument here when it's a factual argument. You couldn't be more wrong. It's the weather that controls this. This doesn't have anything to do with the green revolution.
You don't think the Bush administration? Well, you don't think the Bush administration's ethanol policy pushed up corn prices, Wayne? Is that you disagree with that?
But that doesn't have anything to do with farmers. That has to do with some moron who doesn't try to control the market.
Okay, all right, but Steve, I mean, if they do have some perverse incentive for farmers to plant trees instead of food that we can eat, what do you think is going to happen to food prices?
Well, listen, this is, managing the amount of food that's produced is nothing new in the United States. About 8% of farmable land in the United States is already set aside to be idle by government programs. It's something that just has to be managed properly. I don't think it's going to affect food prices. And if supply starts to get short, you can just cut back on the amount of land that's being left idle. Incidentally, 8% of the farmland is an amount the size of New York State. That's how much is currently left idle. There's plenty of land left to produce.
Right, they're talking about 18 million acres, which is the size of West Virginia. Terry, we have to be concerned about this because while the inflation bubble is not hitting us yet, it will hit us in food prices, absolutely, before it hits anything else. So you go and decrease supply,
to Wayne's point, it already has in sugar, and it's weather-related, which is what Wayne's making the point.
Wayne, so you're adding to it, but you're adding to it.
The price of farming, the biggest cost in farming of guys is the oil and gas that they use in their tractors.
So you don't get it. None of you get it.
Yeah, well, John,
you have nothing to.
Jonathan, you're a close observer.
They don't get it, Terry. Honestly,
all these farm prices.
I'm a close observer of farm prices, yes, and I'm sorry, but a government policy has a lot to do with it. And when that government policy is being dictated by environmentalists who specifically are against man's use of the earth. I'm telling you, you think it stops with paying people not to plant crops? Every time man wants to use earth, a green is there to stand in their way. And that's unfortunately the policy of this administration.
So our food prices are going higher, Jonathan? prices higher?
I think no question. No question.
Okay, heard it from the pig. Coming up next, we'll forget death panels. What about fat panels? We've got the skinny on a whole new government plan to monitor what you eat and how much